Welcome to The Origin of Things, or TOOT for short. A short format podcast where I give you the origins, the backstories, slightly dramatized but 100% true, of things that you know, love, and use. I reveal what I'm talking about only at the very end, keeping you, the listener, guessing. Or so I hope. In previous seasons, I've taken you through the stories that have led to some of your favorite brands and the unlikely stories and accidents that got us there. If there's a lesson from this podcast, let it be that great things can come from the most unexpected of places and sometimes even mistakes. I am your host, Deepak Gopalakrishnan, or as the world calls me, Chuck. The origins of that, for another day. In this season, we're going to do something slightly different. Let's get cracking. 4 episodes, 4 rock songs. My bias is showing. So today, let's talk about something furthest removed from the hard-rocking, leather-clad, shrieking vocals, distorted guitars, and power chords that is rock music, and talk about something at the other end of the spectrum, a church pianist. A church pianist and his greatest moment. A church pianist inspired by literature, a church pianist named William. Growing up, William did have musical talent and was a handy part of his school choir. He could sing, and he was starting to learn the piano as well. He would attend church multiple times a week and even taught Sunday school. A good lad, William. The only sign of rebellion, you could say, was that while practicing with his choir, he would often sing in different voices, apparently to confuse his teacher. No doubt this minor act of musical anarchy would help William develop his voice and, along with his blossoming piano skills, led him to his greatest moment. That greatest moment was a while away, though. When he started professionally composing music, he would be able to come up with a few numbers quickly and efficiently. But there was one tune that he saw immense potential in, but just couldn't finish. It was a melody that he had been working on constantly, sitting at the piano and going at it and at it. In fact, a fellow musician, Tracy, would remark that he would always just be playing that one tune. William replied, "Someday, this song is going to be really cool." To which Tracy would shrug shoulders and reassure the composer that the song was already quite cool. And then William would say, "It's not complete yet," and would keep playing it. To which Tracy would then say, "When are you going to finish that?" To which William would again say, "I don't know." And on they would go for not too long. Not because William finished the song, but because Tracy left the group. And it wouldn't be for another decade almost that the song would finally be released. Well, what changed? Along the way, literature, it would seem. William came across a book called The Language of Fear by an author called Del James. The book was actually a collection of short horror stories. One of these was a story called Without You. William happened to chance upon this, and pieces started falling in place for what would become his finest moment. William entered the studio with all sorts of grandiose plans, including choir sections and string instruments that his group had never tried before. Eventually, it ended up being, wait for it, 25 minutes long. But thanks to reason and commercial imperatives, was skittled down to a mere 9 minutes. Still way too long for commercial radio, one would think. But that's where William's vision would kick in. He took the concept of the story he had read, Without You, and developed an idea for a short film around it. It was large, it was extravagant, it was deliberately larger than life and over the top, and it absolutely totally worked. William and his group, already fairly well known by that time, were now international icons. William's little melody, which had been in his head for almost a decade, finally came to fruition. Not bad for a church pianist. Well, I guess I was stretching the truth when I said William was a church pianist. But indeed, in his most famous moment, he was a church pianist, playing a now iconic piano part while inside a church. And yes, he did compose a tune on a piano, and the subsequent live performances, a grand piano would often be carried around probably for the sole use on this very track. By saying pianist who got inspired by literature, I was hoping to take your minds as far away from the dirty sex and drugs world of rock and roll as possible. But it is possible for hard-rocking musicians to be inspired by literature. The legendary Canadian rock band Rush was heavily inspired by the writings of Ayn Rand. The British heavy metal icons Iron Maiden have references to everything from Samuel Taylor Coleridge's Rime of the Ancient Mariner to Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. And William, too, was inspired by literature, even if it was just a short horror story. A short horror story that inspired a song about, in Williams' words, not wanting to be in a state of having to deal with unrequited love. Whether this is Williams' greatest composition is something that is still up for debate. But what cannot be disputed is its legacy. At the time of writing this episode, the song chalked up 584 million streams on Spotify and 1.7 billion views on YouTube, the most by any song released before 2000. That friend of Williams, who would encourage him to finish that song, his name was Tracy Richard Irving Ulrich. He would call himself on stage Tracy Guns. William himself was William Bruce Rose. Together, Tracy Guns and William Bruce Rose would get together to form a band made of their surnames called Guns N' Roses. William Bruce, of course, would change his name to Axl, and the rest is history. Well, that's about it for this episode, and I guess I should end it now, for nothing lasts forever. Not even cold November rain. See you next week with another episode of The Origin of Things. If you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us and all our shows on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on social media. We are at IVM Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to reach out to me, that's Chuck_Gopal on Twitter and Chuck of All Trades on Instagram. All links in the show notes of this episode. See you next week.